Kings, queens, adepts, initiates, cultists, alchemists, shamans, healers, shamanesses, oracles, readers, especially out to the ones that are going through the healing process. This especially goes out to you. Welcome to the G.O.D podcast. You know, today is the only day that matters. You are the only one that matters because everything is a reflection for you to observe and or experience. And remember, you don't have to experience everything you observe or observe everything you experience. And that leads us into this week's episode. Remember, we in season 4, episode 4, copy and paste. The traumas that create the imprints, trauma creates the imprints. Your accountability creates the impact. This was a major insight for me and for most of us in our healing process. Creating from the imprint gives us a false sense of anchoring while wandering lost in the longing or that feeling of always wanting and needing something, never rising from that imprint. This causes the aspect of the traditional reaction to the new processes. This is where one who, because of the trauma imprint, uses the present reactions in the psyche to the external triggers, those conduits of the internal conflict. That's what we're gonna get into this week. But before that, we gotta get into that God hour. I'm at the God's out here on the God hour. And then I'm gonna give you that weekly reading. This week's reading is very special. It's an oracle reading. So stay tuned. Prepare to stretch beyond your comfort zone. Because outside of your comfort zone is where you're gonna find that clarity. This is where everything's gonna come into that context to make sense. And it's going to allow you to elevate your perspective. It's the G.O.D podcast. Let's get into this. Peace. Let's get into this God thought, shall we? Impact versus imprint. When you are in the right direction, the decoys will come out to play. This is where we get into the power of your impact and becoming aware of just how deep of an imprint the things of the past can affect the indulgence of your growth. Our imprints, the traumas, and the events, actions, ideas, thoughts, places, even people are now in this time, even if you realize it, can affect your impact value of the healing in your building. This is where self-awareness of impulse and indulgence become most prominent. Now, it's a major key of your becoming. One of my favorite analogies, you've been rocking with me, listen to me do lectures, listen to the podcast, listen to me do lives on Facebook and Instagram. Then you know one of my favorite analogies are, if you walk into your crib and you see your lover with your best friend, what do? The impulse would be to jump in or jump in. One of the two. But the level of indulgence is to go, the level that's going to lead you to the indulgence of your growth is to go sit outside and let them finish. Now people are like, man, why the fuck did you let them finish? It's a hard aspect, but I'm giving you a scenario that is in depth for you to sit there and be like, damn, I really need to think about this. Why do you ask this? Because the impulse off of the emotional intellect, yes, you might feel good, you might win the fight, you might feel great. But guess what? Guess what you just created? You created another imprint into the subconscious for your ego to fuel what's actually the ultimate stagnation. Now you can't go past that point because now every time you come into a space, you're going to be triggered about something. You're going to be triggered about something. So the latter or the higher aspect would be, it's going to seem painful. It's going to seem, to say the least, it's going to be painful. You're going to be mad, whatever. But this is what you're going to do. This is what it's causing. It's allowing them to finish. It leaves no room for the old imprint. It leaves no room for them to be able to say apologies or do anything based on an emotional impulse that through your intellect of whatever was triggered in that position. So like, oh my God, my pops cheated on my mom's cheated on my pops, nobody was faithful, and it triggers that aspect. By you going into this indulgence of understanding that trigger, it's gonna allow you to be able to move forward without acquiring more karmic debt. And that's one of those major keys. But before we get deep into this, I gotta give you that reading. Whew. Y'all alright out there? Let's get into this. Let's get these cards shuffled up for this weekly, very special reading. It's an oracle reading. I wanted to throw the oracle cards out there, give y'all more than that. Let's get these cards shuffled up real quick. First card out the pool, stretch. Second card, clarity. Third card, context. Fourth card, perspective. When it comes into understanding, especially since we're centering around the aspect of emotional impulse or the intellectual aspect based on thought and getting more into our impact based on feeling, one of the key things is stretching. Stretching beyond, Spirit give me the aspect, stretching beyond your comfort zone. A lot of this is like a major aspect for a lot of us. We come into a space where something comes up and something's always, let me put it like this, something's always going to challenge you based on the imprint. Based on the imprint and stuff that's going on in the imprint, events, things that have went on of that nature, drama, all of this of that nature, things are always going to affect and bring awareness to that imprint, where that imprint is. And from this aspect, we have to learn how to stretch beyond this in order to bring ourselves into the second card, which is clarity. Our clarity is outside of our comfort zone. So you always have one or two decisions based on your clarity. Your clarity can be clouded based on the emotional impulse. That means you'll sit there in a position and then you'll be like, I'm gonna make this act and I'm gonna do this right here, man. Fuck everybody's feelings, fuck everybody's thoughts. But then now you are wondering why things aren't coming up or things ain't happening the way they should be happening. It's because you stayed within your comfort zone. You didn't stretch outside of your comfort zone to gain clarity. There's a lot of things that you can see when you start using your discernment, you start using your intuition, start using those aspects of thought. This goes into the aspect of understanding the context. Once you're bringing things into the higher aspect outside of your comfort zone, and now you're in that higher altitude of that clarity, it's going to come into this new context. You're going to start asking the why. You'll really start asking whys outside of the narrative of discernment. And that's one of the major ones. Outside of this aspect of judgment. Looking at things through the old lenses, looking at things through the old imprints or the things, and learn how to see how I can see how this would happen. I can see how this scenario plays out. I can see why this would happen. I can see why my job would, I can see why, because I remember at a point in time, at one of my jobs, one of my managers did me did me really, really dirty based on the representation of my name. But the key was, instead of me falling into the imprint of allowing it to trigger me, I allowed myself to step out of that, and I changed my impact. Because I looked at, this is the aspect when you go into risk and reward. I risked to create a new impact. I already knew all the information that I needed. I had all the information, I had all the numbers, I had all the insight. If I moved in an emotional impulse, impulse, I would have cut things off. I would have shut shit down. I would have been like, damn. And then I probably would not be where I'm at right now. I probably, and this is real shit when you start coming into the context, I'd probably still be there. I'd probably still be at a lot of the places or a lot of the jobs that I was in or a lot of the relationships or a lot of the things that I dealt with. I probably would still be in those positions simply because I was moving off of impulse. But since I stood back and actually, even in an unconscious manner, was learning based on the spirit was moving me in the aspect of the context, guess what happened? It allowed me to have a higher perspective. Now I understand why all of those things came out to play. Because I needed to see exactly what it was. Especially with those, like, if you're looking at your higher perspective, looking where you're at, you're thinking that you're feeling betrayed, and people are doing you dirty, your job doing you wrong, your mom, all these aspects of that, all of that stuff needs to be seen so you can see the higher perspective of where it's at. This is where you're able to test. This is where you're able to test your truth in yourself, and then being able to have the reflection of observing and experiencing the truth in others. Because this is the key thing about your perspective when you hire your perspective. Individuals are going to do one of two things. The human narrative is to act on impulse and bring you down. They're naturally going to bring you down into that space. But when somebody is moving with a truth in themselves, they're truly moving in the truth of themselves. They're truly moving in the impact and the higher perspective of themselves. They're always going to take you higher. Even down to what they say. This is when we stop listening to the words, stop listening to the actions, and we start listening to the patterns. We start following the patterns. This is what happens with a lot of us in our perspective when we're not stretching beyond to get more clarity because we're stuck within, well, this hadn't happened. This is the first time that this happened, or this is the second time, but what happened in both instances of this aspect happen? How did this person react? How did my job react? How did this place react? Because from there, this is what's going to allow you to go into that higher perspective of yourself. This is going to help you understand those imprints. This is going to help you understand those impact, how you change your impact. Because this is the key. Once you create the new value of your impact, you're able to build in the new imprints based on your impact. Always build on your impact. Don't build on everybody else's imprint. This is when you got TikTok and you got everybody wanting to sell all these items, and you get stuck within the trend. You get stuck within what matches where you're trying to go based on the external, and you haven't done the work on the internal. So, long story to bring it into perspective, you have to stretch beyond your comfort zone. That's where you'll find your clarity. That's where you're going to gain the context, and that's where you're going to raise into your higher perspective. Be the impact. If you're interested in a reading, stay tuned to the Plug Talk to get that information, and let this message resonate with you and help you move forward. After this break, we don't get into this week's episode. Y'all add out there? I share. You feel like you got a voice, you feel like you got something to say? You feel like you have something that can move the masses or get everybody tuned in and you want a bigger audience? Whether it can be anything from something like the God Hour or anything from like sports, news, fashion week, whatever it may be. Let me put you on to something. The easiest way to do it is with the Anchor app. Biggest thing about it is free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will even do all of the distribution for your podcast for you so it can be heard on many other platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money. You also can make money from your podcast with a minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. It's everything you need to get your voice heard and get what you feel that's in your heart and into your heart out to the masses. If you're interested, download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Welcome to another episode of the God Out Podcast. You know I'm your host, Papa Lucifer. And this week, we're going to get into copy and paste. First thing I'm going to say to start this off is, You can't get through your life copying and pasting, because eventually the imprint fades. And what's left behind from that imprint are only the responses to the new process. This first segment, we're going to be getting into that very aspect. The imprints of traditional reactions and the effects of the developmental stunting or the emotional imbalances. Remember, we've been getting deep into this aspect of imbalances. You have two aspects that you go through. There's the impulse there's the emotional impulse based on the intellect or the intellectual. It was crazy how that's watched the Spirit told me to watch a debate, and it was just funny how it just happened. And then you also have the impact of your genius that stimulates your intelligence. But before we get into that, we're going to start on this. The best example that I could use in this space of the imprint are the aspects of the trauma, the events that have happened in your life, back and forth, things that have happened in your life, they have left imprints. That's what trauma does. Trauma leaves a stamp or leaves an imprint. When you're moving forward in an unhealed state, that means you haven't healed, you have not learned your emotional maturity, you haven't done your shit, you're not doing that, you're not doing this work. You're constantly going to find yourself trying to fill the grooves within that imprint. This is how you know when you filling up the grooves inside of an imprint rather than creating your impact to now filling your own imprint. I'm sitting in a space right now for myself. I'm sitting in my space for myself right now, and I'm looking at my impact. I would not be in this space that I'm in right now until I was able to have self-realization and the awareness of my imprints, how I started, where I came from. So if you think about it like this, think about this narrative. You get a job. You get a crib. You get a car. You get in a relationship. You have some kids. Okay. Your impulses. These are the impulses. Based on that imprint is however you fulfill that space is going to be based on the impact of those traumas, the impact of the events that happened before you came to that point. Remember, it's all in continuum. Past, present, and future, always in the same continuum. So when you think about, I never can get my life right, my life never can seem to get together, based on the thought process, you keep that thought in your mind. You remember the thought's already in the past as soon as you had it. The thought's already gone. So moving off the thought, in order to stimulate the thought, you need some type of stimulant. The only way to stimulate an impulse is based off the emotional aspect of yourself, the emotions. So what stimulates the emotion? Those little imprints. What brings you into balance? When you are aware of when you are aware and you're able to look back at the things that you went through and be able not only to accept, not only be aware, but accept and apologize. The next key is to be able to be thankful. I remember one thing that my pops said, and it just sits and makes more sense because of all the trauma and all the events that happened around it. It actually rose that to the surface for me to understand it once I got remove those layers. He always told me that, it doesn't matter how many, I'm paraphrasing it. It doesn't matter how many times or the thought process. It doesn't matter how long you've been at a job or whatever. If they fire you, you can't be mad. They get rid of you, terminate you, you can't be mad. There's more to that. We don't get into that, but the main reason why he was like, they paid you for every hour that you work. I've said this in many lectures. I've said this in many episodes. They paid you for every hour that you worked. You see, impulses are the preconditions. Impulses are the preconditions. The success of any of your when we break down to it, the success of any of your interactions is going to be based on the absence of those preconditions. That's one of the hardest things for a lot of us is when we step into these spaces where we should just be enabled, or in order to learn, we have preconditions. Preconditions create ownership of the thought. So now I'm owning now I have not taken the aspects of understanding the trauma of whatever event I've been through. So now that I'm sitting in this space for myself, it's like I got paid for every hour at every job that I work. It was it's the condition that you have in your mind that you about to go to that job and they're going to pay all of your bills. It's the precondition of you going into a relationship thinking it's going to fulfill every one of your needs or your wants. It's that precondition that keeps the emotional impulses stimulated. So now you act based on that thought process. So if it doesn't fit, this is the key. If it don't fit those original grooves, you ain't got no use for it. Fundamentally, you become stagnant. I've been in plenty of situations where my emotional impulse cost me the game. It cost me what I could learn in that space. Remember, when we think about the game, we think about the applied knowledge. It cost me the game. There was moments in time where I really think about it right now when I just think about it. If I did not go through those emotional impulses, I would not know how to become self-aware, and I would not be in the position that I'm in. I would not be living in the now. I would still be stuck in the past. I think about every job that I've ever had. I think about every job that I ever had, every relationship that I was in, based on my preconditions, based on all those thought processes. Those are the shits that blurred the lines of the patterns for me to have clarity while I was there in the first place. Everything down here for you to learn from. Once you embrace that aspect, get that, this shit's a breeze. You ain't mad no more. You ain't upset no more. Nothing can get to you. But there's keys to it. You got to understand these imprints. Those imprints, every time that something lifts up out of that imprint, going back to that space, okay, cool. You got the job, you got the car, you got the house, you got a kid. Whether you single, not single, whatever, you got the kid, you got that archetype in there. How are you going to build within that space? If that imprint was created by something else, how do you take ownership and fill that imprint? You can't. You're constantly filling that imprint based upon everything that came from back there. So it has to fit from the same narrative. That means the same traumas, the same events. This is how most people get stuck in their spaces where they're at. No accountability, no awareness, and no accepting. So they can't apologize. Therefore, they cannot forgive themselves. Therefore, they can't thank for where they just came from. And there's really no need for them to have to do any of that work because they're still there. This is how you know that you have not, this is how you know you're still trying to fill an old imprint. It's because when it fills up and it overflows, and this would be a key moment for you to become aware of your pattern, because it fills up so you can now have literally a carbon copy of that pattern. Instead of you looking at that pattern like, damn, that's what I've been following. That's what I've been trying to fill up. Instead of allowing it to fill up, what do? You vent. You find another space that fits that same pattern. You're thinking about it if your shoes walking forward. Think about those footprints in the sand. Think about the footprints in the sand. Think about you being in a certain space when you have a certain thought process to yourself and why you do the things that you're doing based on emotional impulse. You mad at your man. You mad at your chick. You mad at your mother. You mad at your father. You mad at them for something. Whether it's past, present, or future, it doesn't matter. It's in the continuum. So now you have to naturally go find things that match that frequency. And you see it through the aspect of the symbolism. Most of us are friendships, those trauma bonds that we talked about before, they're based on emotional impulse. The only reason that you keep, if you are always in a good state of being, you are always in a balanced state of being and centered, what would be the purpose of having your friends right now? What would be the purpose of certain family members right now? What would be the purpose of that job right now? What would be the purpose of that person, place, idea, thing, whatever it may be? What would be the purpose of it? It wouldn't serve a purpose anymore. See, when we moving in this impact thought process, it's always reacting to the new process. What's the very new process? Something that we're supposed to be able to embrace and then change our impact and change our tune. I remember sitting in my jobs for like long periods of time, and one of my bosses did me like hellified dirty. Like, just did me dirty. Like, cut my hours, did a whole bunch of stuff, like falsified paperwork, did a whole bunch of stuff. In this moment, it's one of those aha moments because it came from the heart. I remember I was like, before I left, something told me, ended up being the spirit. The spirit told me, go holler at one of my managers. Holler at my manager that me and him was cool. And he gave me a number. He gave me a number to the overheads of my boss's bosses. And I had a conversation with him because I've already met them. You see how I'm changing the impact? So instead of me reacting to the imprint, I was creating my impact. So then I called my boss, who was like, I want to see you soon in there. I'm going to set the meeting up. I'm going to call you and let you know when to show up. I ain't even going to let them know I'm going to call them. I'm going to show up after I call you and let you know to be there. Went in there, went into the job, sat down. I'm sitting beside my area director. My boss's boss. And one of my managers, they hand her this big ass folder of like write-ups. The first thing my area director said was, as my general manager got upset, was getting upset with like, you see all those write-ups, I can't keep them here. And then my area director said one line, and I was like just sitting there laughing to myself. In my head, I was laughing. She was like, you know the policy in the handbook, right? So if none of these are signed in front of you, then they're non and void. Like, well, he wouldn't sign them. Even if he did sign it, at the bottom, on the back of all of our write-up forms, there is the reason why I do not agree with this statement and to appeal it. So not only did I not sign it, put my energy into it, I didn't write an appeal. Because if I wrote an appeal, it would have been an emotional impulse. So those didn't exist. They doctored up a whole bunch of them. But this key for me was my first taste of not acting on impulse. Years later, things like that would continue to happen. Years later, things would continue to happen like this. The reason that it was repeating itself because I was still within that same imprint. Get the job, work really, really hard, get some things from it, and succeed. The original imprint for most of us is based in trauma. And we understand that that trauma became the original cause. So the trauma is actually an imprint, or that symbol is now that energy. So if I had a traumatic childhood, when I had the trauma that happened in my childhood, the energy that it created created those emotional imbalances. In order for those emotional imbalances to come into play, for me to continue using them, I can never fill this space with anything. And this is the major key. I can never fill that space with anything that would help me grow. I can never fill that space with anything that'll help me grow. When you're stuck in the imprint of your old aspects of yourself, the way that you react to these things, the way that you're reacting, the way that you're moving, the way that you're putting yourself into that certain space, the reason that you're there and it seems to be overwhelming is because it's a superficial anchor of the external connected to those traumas. So now you're trying to live this life that you are dreaming of, but the life that you're trying to dream of ain't even the truth to you, because it's always based on a constriction. Emotional impulse, or the intellectual, or the thought is always going to be based on some type of restriction. You can look at it in the whole aspect. Everything that you're doing is coming into connection. So why would you need anything that's based upon attachment? The universe is naturally going to bring balance into your space, and we don't think about it this way. This is a big thing. Everything that comes into your space is based upon anchoring you to further understanding and connection. Everything down here, from the children to everything that come into your life, is meant to show you something. They got their own path. They're in your light. They're on the line with you to learn from you. This became one of those big things. I remember I was listening to a David Banner episode, and he was like, I can't remember what episode or what show it was on, but he was like, the reason we never can seem to get ahead is because we always want someone to start where we started. But then when you go deeper in it, it's based on that. I can go deeper. It's based on that imprint of that mindset. So my imprint or my mindset is rooted within struggle, rooted within the trauma, rooted within childhood trauma and pain and oppression and all of these narratives. And I'm stuck in that mindset. Man, my mom didn't love me enough. My pops didn't love me enough. That imprint that is set there, I will never step out of that imprint. It can be refilled. This space is inherently flawed. So it's always going to cycle out and empty out by itself just so you can refill it again. But once you master your emotions, that shit naturally fills. And now you have a new mold. You never don't have to go back to that space. Everything that you need to see is now to the surface. Comes to the surface for you to be able to understand it. And this is when you're getting into the aspects of your impact. But you got to get through the impression. That's why they say the impressionable. Children are highly impressionable. This is why they keep you in that childlike mindset and not the childlike innocence. The childlike innocence is based on impact. The childlike mind is based on imprint. The childlike mind is based on imprint, and the childlike innocence is based on impact. Think about when you were little, when you were a little kid. No one can tell you that you couldn't fly. No one can tell you that you couldn't run really fast. You were simply in that state and making an impact of proving why. You went and grabbed you wouldn't put the cape on. You watched Mighty Mouse, Superman, whatever motherfucker was flying across the sky. For us, it was like G.I. Joe and Dragon Ball Z and stuff of that narrative. Nothing can tell you that you couldn't fly. Even when you came into that space, this is the realest thing about it. Even the reason most of us is watching anime, Dragon Ball Z, and all of these aspects is because naturally within us, that's that's feeding our impact. That's feeding our childhood innocence. Remember, to be childlike, we're talking about in the innocence of the heart. We ain't talking about in the intellectual aspect of the mind, the impression of the mind. This is where a lot of us get confused with when we start taking in information. Since we're thinking with the childlike aspect of the mind, we become impressionable. So now you moving into your space, you moving around in your space, and if it fits the impression, then you allow it to fill in there. But if it impacts you, when it triggers, when that impact hits, when that truth hits you, when it's an impact and it hits you, that's when you're supposed to realize, what doesn't fit is what you're supposed to be getting into. Why doesn't that fit? That's the natural scientific method. Why doesn't that fit? The key of moving without bias is not trying to make it fit. That's what the aspect of religion, or to binds you to the fundamental of trying to keep something in that space. See, subconsciously, the impression of the fundamental aspect is what is banding under. Remember, back in the first Batman, when Joker was poisoning everybody, Panic does a lecture and breaks down all the Batmans. It's not going to be based on what is sitting right there in front of your face. It's going to be these parts and these impartial pieces that are programmed in and that are copied and pasted by the mind. Remember, the subconscious is a big-ass suggestion box. It just simply takes information in. So having the stuff that you're taking in, the reason that it's hard when it's starting to come out, the vulnerability, the being in that space of healing, it's because there's so many different imprints, so many different copy and paste narratives pasted onto that same damn impression in that imprint. So you may get to the surface, you may get to the depth of one layer, but then you got to peel another layer back. You got to remove everything that was in that imprint, to get to the original print. So you can now look at the original print and see how all of these things fit within that space. But see, when you do it unconsciously, you just basically moving around. I got a job. I got a house. I got a car. If I don't have the house or the car, then it's okay, cool. I understand the game. But when you understand the game based on a narrative, based on precondition, all you're going to be doing is manipulating. You'll never be able to take accountability because it won't fit your imprint. You'll never be able to feel aspects of your accountability because it won't feel your imprint. You've learned how to manipulate. The first person to taught you how to manipulate anything was your mother. The first person to teach you about manipulation was your mom, your pops, aunt, uncle, big brother, big sister. They taught you how to manipulate the situation. They taught you based on their emotional impulses within the trauma or the event. They taught you from them. So now you had your original version, and then fundamentally sound laid on top of that was the copy and paste narrative of their narrative. So this is why when you going in them spaces, it blew my mind when I was actually thinking about this. When you going into spaces, whenever you're angry, you go to a certain place. When you sad, you go to a certain place. Whenever shit's going good, even when shit is going very good, you're healing, you're learning, you're coming into a new space. The decoy, whenever you're on the right path, you're going the right direction, you're in the right space, that's when the decoys come out to make you react on impulse. The decoy is created is that created aspect that you create based on the thought. The decoy is your human thought. So your decoy pop out and make you think a certain way about something, and then you go on a whole fucking impulsive rant about it. But in your imprint is not there. For some people, their imprint, there's no such thing as being wrong. Because you still looking to be right or wrong. You still looking to win or lose. You haven't learned how to forgive yourself. You haven't learned how to forgive yourself. So guess what you're doing now? Now you in every space. Every day you inside of that space, That mindset. Think about, remember, because every time you're thinking, you're actually listening. What are you listening to is your key. This is going to be your key. What are you listening to? Are you listening to the broken aspect? Are you listening to what aspect are you listening to? It's time for you to actually learn how to stretch beyond. That's when we talked about in the Oracle reading. Stretch beyond your comfort zone to gain true clarity of the space, to gain the truth, to gain what can become your truth, how you can apply it. This is going to help you bring into the contexts to higher your perspective. And that's going to lead you to the new impact. What you see, even right now in the conscious community, motherfuckers is right now still arguing about whatever it may be, because they still stuck within the same old imprint. Their imprint is based on, for niggas ain't shit, bitches ain't shit, the white man ain't shit, all these people ain't shit. That's their imprint. So they're still acting within the imprint, so they feel that imprint. So they're stuck within the trends and the glamours and the projections of said imprint, because they're waiting on something else to make the impact. This is why when most people come into a space and someone gives them information and they're still thinking with that impressionable childlike mind, and they're not coming from that childlike heart, that childlike innocence, which is of the heart, and they come in those positions, they always want to argue with you. They'll argue with you over nothing. They'll vent everything. They'll be venting, but it's all based on emotional impulse. And not one time will they catch the pattern. Even if they admit the why, they'll ask the question, but they don't have the answer. Because it doesn't fit the fundamentals. This is when you come into the aspect of release. I did my release ritual on their New Year's, and I ain't never felt good ever since. Since I've done my release ritual, everything that needed to shut away has fell off. Everything has shown up, shown itself, and fell off. And I've accepted, I'm like, damn, I've learned from it. This is why you can't do this. It is not based on the winning and losing, staying in that same imprint. What triggered me, like damn, I've been sitting back, cool, calm, collected ever since. That was the biggest ritual for me of the 2020. I'm in 2021. I've made decree. I've been making decrees all week, all fucking month, for the last couple days. If you look at my Facebook page, I made a decree of these next 365 days cycle of events. LLCs. Even if I do not launch the LLC in this moment in time, I will be able to put together the business plan, because I've created that sigil, and we're going to get into that next. Because my mindset is within my impact now. That heal process allows you to make impacts. It allows you to make the moves. It allows you to make the new grooves. Only in what I impact do I create the space to fill. But I got to make the impact first. The only way I can make an impact is becoming empty to fulfill myself. And that's what we're going to get into next. Welcome to the God Hour. Y'all that out there? The impact of. In order to get into the impact of and understanding how to make that impact and why that impact is so important at this point in time, it's been important. But in order to understand this aspect, we got to understand really understanding that those old aspects, and I said imprint a lot. I'm going to say imprint a lot. I'm going to say impact a lot, because it's shaking you. It's shaking you out of that old space. So now you're going to start thinking about everything based on the imprints of my old self versus the impact of me becoming my authentic self. Remember, you're building an authentic self. The impact, too, is the releasing and the difference between emotional impulse and the indulging in your genius. Even when I'm sitting here doing nothing, I'm indulging in my genius. Bobby Hemmings said that shit the best. Like, I mastered doing nothing. That takes genius to do nothing. To sit there and not follow the impulse to feel like you need to be doing something. This is a major key in the creative process. I also wanted to say in the creative process, the thing that will stop your creative process is that emotional stunting. I remember sitting with myself and I was like, every time I did something, and this is the impact of one of my mentors. I remember one time we were sitting there and he would always go through the list of things that had to be done. Always giving us the list of things to be done. And be like, all right, cool, let's get this done. Good job, brother, whatever. But he never personalized the good job to anybody, nobody in particular. And I remember one time somebody asked him, one of the managers asked him at the meeting, was like, so why do you never seem to, you always seem to tell Charlie Manson over here, that was one of my nicknames. When I watched the crowd, like, nigga, I am kind of deep and twisted in that sense. But he sat there and was like, why you always tell Charlie, you tell Charlie Manson, good job. And then my mentor looked at me, he was like, Charlie, tell him I tell you good job. Because I'm not expecting it. I'm like, wait, so what would be the point of telling you? I was like, I'm not expecting a good job because I'm simply doing what I'm supposed to be doing in that space. So when Nick tells me good job, it's usually because I exceeded the space. I made an impact. If you've ever noticed that Nick is always going to tell us something based on the impact. So if you do something outside of your normal space and you make an impact, that's when he notices. They never quite got it. This is a key for us. When you are now in the state of you're making an impact, you're making yourself known, you're creating your authentic self. You have now emptied yourself you're now in the process of emptying yourself of all that only serves based on the imprint of the thought of the emotional impulse versus the indulgence of your genius. I indulge in my genius every single day. Everything that you will hear me ever say is coming from the heart. It's coming from my head. Nothing I say comes from the mind. I can create the things through the mind, but everything that I speak, everything that I proclaim is from the heart. When you're in the aspect, this is how you start training this. Emotional impulses are based on the intellect, based on what a person knows. So if you coming from your heart with something that somebody's never seen before, they haven't had the impression of that to happen before, this is why you make a different impression in them. But even in that space, you can make, that's like, okay, remember I used the shoe analogy earlier. Here's the footprint right here. This is their footprint. Beside it, you step beside them and you make an imprint. Your shoe print is going to be different than theirs. Y'all wearing two different sets of shoes. In order for them to understand you, it isn't putting on your shoes. This is what most people do in that space. It isn't putting on your shoes. It's looking at the indentation from the impact of your shoe hitting the ground. Studying that aspect. Studying all and following none. See, when you're moving in this emotional impulse, you're always going to find yourself trying to pull back or hold on. You're always going to find yourself holding back, holding stuff in, because you ain't learned or if you release it, it's only based on feeling where the fuck you already are at. This is where people get scared of actually releasing and start calling their power back to them in that space. The key of calling your power back to you, I've said this before, I actually posted it. The key of you calling your power back to you is asking for it to be released from the conduits of what you created. See, a lot of people call their power back to them, then they wonder why an ex come out of nowhere, or a family member or some shit come out their past out of nowhere. It's because you have not released it. In releasing it from the conduit of what you created, you're acknowledging to your subconscious mind that you are now defining what it was, how you created it, and why it was there. Until you're able to do this, everything that person does, everything that idea does and triggers is going to make you move on impulse. And that's what's going to stifle you and keep you in that position. Seeing it for what it is. I've told people, like, many times, I've told actually two of my clients the other week that I've forgiven and can thank everybody I had a relationship with, family, otherwise. That's a key aspect in your shadow work, is being able to sit there in that position. I readjust my headphones. Sit in that position and be able to say, I thank you for the impact you had on my life. Because through the impact that you had in my life, I learned how to grow until I'm able, because this is the key, until you're able to thank them for the impact they had in your life, you can't step out of that old impression. Because you'll always use that old that old aspect of impression to express yourself. I am expressing. So this is whenever you're in a trigger set of events, you're only acting as I am impression. I am the impression. I'm only reacting to the impression. I'm the impression. So that's when you're acting off impulse. You're acting off the impression of others. So if somebody tells you, so you won't ask certain questions based on a yes or no, that you need in order for you to move forward or to go for fear of rejection. I've talked about it in the rejection episode. When you're stuck in rejection. You're like, if you sitting inside of a space, you sitting somewhere and someone in front of you stinks, what do you say? Innocence of a child, something smells. Innocence of a child, something smells. You, based on impression, the impression that this person has made to you in your life and what they've represented based on filling these certain cracks and crevices in your molding of that imprint of your emotional impulse, it challenges you. So now what do you do? Remember, everything that's happening is supposed to train you to make you better. If you're still going into space, think about it like this. If you're still going into these spaces, why are you going there? If you know, this is based on the intellect. If you know the issues of that space, and you know that they're only reflective for you to experience and observe, but you've observed it, you've learned it, and now what are you supposed to do next? This becomes that key in making your new impact. That impact in your friend telling you that you ain't shit because you don't like to be around them anymore. That impact of that family member says, oh, that nigga's crazy. You created an impact. It's not your job to fill that impression. It's their job. I said it in Friday's lecture, Emancipation Proclamation. Once you emancipate yourself, once you have now defined what you are emancipating yourself from, you define what you're emancipating yourself from, and you proclaim what you are now and you're building inside of that space. Once you're in your sovereignty, once you're in your free, you understand that you are free and you are now sovereign. It's not up to you to give them the information to validate you. This is where we get stuck a lot of times. We're trying to validate ourselves. We try to validate our emotional impulse. We sit here and try to and this is when you start, you'll know when you are acting on emotional impulse when you over-explain yourself. You know that you are acting on an emotional impulse when you start to over-explain yourself. Because you're overthinking in that same narrative, so you're over listening to that voice and you're giving it form. So you're now creating that form in front of you for it to exist. So this is why it's pointless to argue with anybody. Because at a point in time, all you're doing is, the only reason that you're engaged in this argument is because you need that energy to make your shit true. Agree to disagree? Nah, it's because it is. It's because it is. You need something to hide within. You're like, I have no fear. I'm not scared. I have no fear, no stress, no worry. I ain't had no fear, no stress, no worries for about a year and a half in this time present. And the biggest test to my fear narrative, the last shot in the coffin to put my fear in a full box, was when I left I didn't leave. I just didn't go back. I didn't go back to my job. I didn't go back to the restaurant I was in. Because I no longer fit that impression. While I was in that space, I was more aware like how I was changing. I went from wearing the traditional uniform, the black hat, black pants, I still wore the uniform, but I accented the hell out of my shit. I got a Haru ring on my hand. I was wearing that all the time. I was wearing my beads or I was wearing my different talismans under my shirt. Sometimes they fall out of my shirt. I was making an impact. I was making a mold for myself. And once that mold was created, I didn't have to worry about anything. I was creating my impulse. I wasn't moving on impulse. By the time I was done, by the time I left, had damn near everybody in there was trying to wear black gloves. So many things that I left in that space. Everybody trying to wear black gloves because I made an impact. This is how you know when your energy is inside of space and what it's doing. When you're making a true impact, it forces everything around you to either evolve or fall under the shoe, so to speak. When you're making that step and you're actually growing, you're grooming yourself, that's what you're stepping yourself into. Everything that I do at this point in time is based on the impact. And since I'm building these things based on my original impact of creating God, Occult, Alkhemist, LLC, my environment, creating Papa Lucifer, the deity that controls that environment or has the reign over that environment, my atom, everything that I do is based on impact. And since I'm true to the innocence of the childlike aspects of my heart, it's the ultimate creative space. Everything to the beat that you're listening to behind the words that I'm speaking, to the opening music, to the opening thought, to the reading, All of those are creations of me interacting with my space, all based upon making an impact. I could do a whole podcast based on emotional impulse, but then I'll be stuck and constricted. See, when you're doing this aspect, this is another thing, these are keys of understanding when you stuck with an emotional impulse. When you stuck with an emotional impulse, guess what you're doing all the time? Constantly constricting yourself, constantly shutting yourself down, constantly keeping yourself in a position where you're not going any forward. Even, and this is even the real shit, even the best thing can happen to you in your life. That person, that job, that career move, that school, this event, whatever it may be, best thing can come into your life. But based on your emotional impulse, when it stops you, you can't take any of the information in. One of the biggest things that I had to learn, and a lot of us need to learn, is everything that's happening is happening as it's supposed to. Go with the flow. I've said it before. I remember when I was starting my platform, my company, and I was like, yo, I got to have a business account because I now have an LLC. I need a business account. And I remember every time I was going somewhere or doing something or starting to do stuff, I was looking at my name on it, and then there was so many returns back to the accounts, my business accounts, because I didn't have an account to put it into. I couldn't put the money from the God Occult Alchemist God Hour podcast into my regular checking account. I had to create a business account to make that energy flow to there. So now I got all these streams coming into that space. And shout outs, thank you for the donations. It's supporting the growth. All these things come into that new conduit, this new space. Now that I've created this new containment that's limitless, because I got all types of good benefits with my business account. It's a high-end, high-yielding checking account that on every dollar I get a nice, good piece of interest back in that aspect. There's benefits in it, limitless benefits. That's your key when you're creating when you're bringing yourself into this space and you're moving out of the impulse of the emotion. You can learn from everything. This is what the indulgence of your genius is. As you indulge your genius, the key of indulging your genius is simply the wanting to do. This is what stimulates your intelligence. This is what stops you from questioning everything based on the bias and start questioning everything on simply to know more. You won't ask loaded questions. I have clients all the time ask me loaded questions. All the time. They'll ask me a question, but it's starting, remember, there's the beginning, middle, and end, past, present, future, always in the same continuum. They always ask me from the middle or the end. So their question is formulated to pull from the middle or the end. So that's a bias. When you're going from one side or the other, remember, either side or the middle point is bias. When you're centered, there's no bias. So if you're on this end over here in the negative, you're going to be biased against anything that could be possibly positive. Even when the positive things come in, you're biased, so you're waiting for the negative. And on the positive end, now you're biased only based to the positive. So now you don't understand when the negative comes in. This is the aspect when you think about it, like good things always happen to bad people and bad. So does that mean all bad things happen to good people? You had that example. Bad people got all the bad guys got all the technology. They got all the technology, the cool guns, the cool weapons, and the good guys don't have anything. Here's the key. Moving based on that emotional impulse is like being the bad guy without understanding that the good guy is needed. You'll be biased and you'll put yourself into like, I want everything positive, I gotta remove everything negative. See, what the bad guy understands is the villain, such as you think about the Joker, he knows there's an in-depth need for the good, or he wouldn't exist. See, when you stuck in that positive mindset or in that old aspect of yourself on emotional impulse, you'll be stuck always looking for the negative. You'll always go for the worst scenario. You'll always go for the worst case scenario. You'll always go for the worst thought. And then you'll try to build on the worst thought. And the only thing that you're going to have is any information that's based upon in your memory anyway. The trauma. All men cheat. All women is unloyal. All white men are evil. Emotional impulse. When you come into that space, to that balance, you understand there's a need for both sides. This is how you gain your charge. They're reflective of everything. Anything that's negative in your life is going to be something that is reflective of something to teach you what you need to deal with. And the things that are positive within your life, they should be challenging you. The positive things should really be challenging you. They're challenging you to take a new charge. See, when we get stuck in this aspect of the negative in our lives, and we're always looking for the negative, when we can't find it, we create it. Just like you try to create the positive. So in that same sense, I can sit here, like, think about it like this. Think about the mother that was getting beat up on the TV show or the sitcom or in your life. Think about when your pops put hands on your moms. Or your moms put hands on your pops. Your mom's natural intuitive thought was to still try to make the best of the situation. Try to make the best of the situation. Try to. Try to make a beautiful Sunday dinner. Try to make that beautiful holiday ham or whatever. And as soon as one thing happens that's out of place, what happens? The filter goes away. The filter was only temporary. The veil was only temporary. Right now, you're sitting in a space where there is no more veil. Right now, most of y'all are sitting in a space where the shadows are prominent as fuck. That means them bitches is fucking dense as hell. They damn near look like people. In that context, they damn near look like people right now. And they are. For some of y'all, it is people. For some of y'all, that relationship that you in right now is the biggest reflection of things that you need to fucking work on. That job that you at, that seem to irritate the hell out of you and get on your nerves and you ain't getting nowhere, it's a very example of how you internally are not going anywhere because you haven't challenged yourself. You stuck within the old groove of yourself. I remember being stuck in the old groove of myself. So much codependency. I was so codependent upon my job. And I really found out my codependency when I didn't have a place to stay. Because the way that I used to survive based on hustle was so buried down deep behind the trauma of losing the job that was already just refilling the imprint, stuck in that mold, that I was just moving on emotional impulse. Instead of taking the aspect of understanding the impact if I actually did something. It wasn't until I actually started doing something, that means taking responsibility, taking accountability. It's not always physical. This is going to be the key. It's not always physical. See, when you're moving on emotional impulse, you're always moving in an aspect of physical. You need something physical to fill with your charge. Whenever you're stuck within that mindset or in that space within your mind based on an emotional impulse on intellect, you always look for something physical to set the tone or the definition of where you're at. But you'll never be able to, so since you stuck on that end, you're not looking at the entire, you can't look at the whole picture. Most people that I used to associate with, just me being my health standards, they don't fuck with me. Most of the things that I go into depth in topics about, they can't fill that space. So they don't come around. They'll make excuses. This is where you're going to start seeing that what your impact's doing. Your impact is going to come off as you're antisocial. Your impact is going to come off as you're an asshole. Your impact is going to come off as you're bougie. Your impact is going to come off as all of these filters that do not define you. Here is your key, as I said in that analogy, into not allowing yourself to finish the current. Because remember, every time something's sent out, it's sent out on a current or a stream. If you react to it, then it completes the current in the stream. So now you're going back and forth in this argument. You're going back and forth in this tandem of these words in that space to complete that current. Now everybody's charged up in that space. So here's how you gonna win. They say you bougie, say you right. They say you a devil worshiper, say you right. They say you think you better than us because you healthy, say you right. Shoot at their ego every time. Because since you're telling them that they're right, they have one of two choices. Either they're going to come and give you their predisposition of why they're right, or they're going to step off. Because you made an impact right there. You released an impact that they got to act on. And they'll spend the entire time with no information trying to fill up your shit. They can't fill your space. They can't fill your shoes. They can't fill your fucking shoes. I expect no one, and this is the key, I expect nobody to fill my shoes. I expect nobody to take my place. Because I'm one of one. I expect you, this is why I say this at damn near everything what I say, I want you to be fucking great because I want you to exceed. I want you to exceed and excel. Because that's going to give me the aspect of why I'm still building within the impact that I'm making is doing it. The impact is of my true purpose. My vision board. The sigil that I'm creating now has something that is going to feed that energy off of. That's your key. But we're going to get into this break real quick. We're going to get a little bit in, we're going to get a little more into the impact, and then we're going to end it off with this last session. Yeah. Stay tuned after this. And we're back. Take that time to go relieve myself and grab 3 more bottles of water. I remember I was listening to watch the Bobby Hemmett lecture. It was a while back. And I remember he was talking about drinking water. And I remember during that time, I was like, I got to make this make sense for me. And when I started drinking water, it was around the time when I was changing up my health habits, changing up my eating habits. And I got to the gallon a day. And I remember when it tapered off. I was like, why am I not able to continuously do this? And then it hit me. Well, we've been talking about this entire episode. I didn't create the impact. I didn't create the impact because somewhere still within inside me, within my mind, within my mentalities, were still the old imprints of doing just enough. This is when you come into the aspects of understanding that your impact must first affect you. Your impact must first and primarily, it affects you. So what things do you allow to impact your life? And this leads into our final segment of this session, self-published. We went through the imprints of the traditional reactions and the effects of the multiple stunting, which led us into the impact to releasing and the difference between emotional impulse and indulging in our genius, which shifted us into our becoming self-published or our authentic self. Vision boards and creating sigils and invoking new ideas. Everything that you do is getting imprinted into the subconscious mind, so this becomes a normal act. This is one thing that with a lot of people when they're doing things, if you're doing it based on to fill up a void inside of a space, the tool becomes a crutch. You never become the tool. One of the major keys is once you master and understand what the tool is for, you become the tool. Even though I still build altars, I still rock with my altars, learning process. The altars are now my vision boards. As opposed to me using vision boards like I used to use, and I only use a vision board when it's something very in the pre-phases, like the pre-phase. Like I'm working on these business imprints for the new LLCs that I'm working on to expand my streams. It's to expand my streams. So when I'm writing things down now, is I used to write shit down in pen. Now I'm writing shit in. I'm using pencil, using real lead, using pencil. I got a box of number 2 pencils over there that I keep sharpening up just for like creating new ideas and writing stuff down. Because you know when you write, you're automatically going through the thought process. And that's when I do in that beginning. I am the impression. Whatever I write down, I am the impression. Whatever I accept in my life, I am the impression of that. I'm an impression for that energy to now flow through. I just got my Akashic record, my Akashic tarot cards the other day. I got a set of the human design cards, 64 gates and lines that I'm studying into now. But these are second level. These are second level. I have already done the work with my Akashic records, understanding my Akashic records, breaking down those aspects. So now I have this tool in front of me. The tool is not to help me to be able to just read off and be like, okay, Sue, this sounds profound. The tool will be used for me to illustrate the energy that I'm reading. This is going to be the key in you becoming that vision board. Never be afraid to start, even if it just starts with the vision board. I don't care if you go to Office Depot, Walmart, wherever they sell dry erase boards, and you get a bunch of different color expo markers, and you just scribble all over that board, and you might erase some shit. You might find a picture. You might find a picture and print it out, or if you're looking in a magazine, you might rip something out and put it on that vision board. Create that vision board, because this is going to teach you discipline. Every day when I rise, I meditate. Before I go to bed, I set an intention in my mind of a question that I'm going to ask or where I want to go. At first, it was asking myself questions. Now I'm putting myself to go into places. So now I got that in my mind. Now I'm going to this place. I'm going to that place. I'm going to this. I'm going to these places in that space. Now I go to sleep. I'm going to that space. I'm taking my inner child. Yeah. Carlos, let's go. We flying off. We going. We in the astral realm. We having fun. Going where only the gods can go and the titans can go. All that good fun shit. At 5 a.m., at 4:30, I'm coming back. During the witching hour, during the spiritual hour, I'm coming back. Even more now, the astral realm and this realm they're in direct concert with each other, because every time that I put something out into the space, now that I'm more self-aware, this is the key. Now you have to be self-aware to be able to see this. You'll feel it, but you got to be self-aware to be able to see it. I've been more aware of the astral bodies and that quantum world coming into existence, because now that I'm inside this space, I'm moving off less emotional impulses, even less. They're in the negatives now, in that case, in this context, of the world in that space. And now I'm looking at myself, and it's like I'm mindful of what I say and how I say it. Not based on holding back, but I'm telling my truth. Setting my tone up for what I'm envisioning. I'm able to now look at my vision board from the mental scape and remove pieces off of this vision board and be able to see where whatever is trying to come into my vision that doesn't match my board, it doesn't match it. There's not a sigil programmed in my subconscious, or that symbol's not programmed in my subconscious. That shit does not play here. So I'm able to deal with it at that point in time, making furthermore impacts. See, sometimes we come into that space where we're stuck within those impressionable moments, those impressionable times, that impressionable thought process. And we've allowed that old aspect of ourselves, and we've become, I'm the impression of what I've been through. See, when something doesn't fit the only way something is coming up, the negatives come up, is because it's challenging you based on the impression of what you've been through. I am that impression. That represents me. This is when you start looking at people, friends, family, old relationships, new relationships. You look at how they reflect you. You look at how you're learning from them. You're not using judgment, you're using actual discernment. Because when you're stuck within the I am the impression of where I came from, you're going to look at them with judgment. You're going to look at them with disdain. You're going to hold back. Because the reason that they still can come into your space is because you're still holding on to the definitions of what it was, they were within that space. That was my friend. What's your definition of a friend? That was my family. What's your definition of a family member? As you evolve, your definitions are going to evolve. My friends, anybody that I rock with, my soul tribe, they're not based on the emotional impulse just for me to feel good. Hell, a couple of minutes ago, I sent out the mass text telling everybody in my messenger list about the next podcast episode, and my brother came through, and I was like, I customized this shit. I was like, bro, what you think about the music? Me and my brother, we don't talk every single day. Me and that member of my soul tribe, we don't talk every single day. There's not a codependency or a preconditioned thought process that I got to talk to my brother every day. But when I do speak to my brother, we're saying some of the most profound shit to each other, even in the aspect of innocence, not even trying. You see, when you steady being in these spaces, trying to create your vision, some people get stuck on their vision, on trying to make everything based on that precondition. So you got your vision board sitting in front of you and you're like, I want to make some money. Everybody wants to make money. But if your precondition is to make money, that means everything that you do is going to be connected to the aspects of making money as your primary target. So if your vision board is not showing, not giving you money, then what do? You get disheartened and you start taking things off your vision board. You start trying to tweak everything to try to make it fit. See how you try to tweak everything to try to make it fit? That very example is for a lot of us in the relationships that we hold so dear. That happens to a lot of us when we based in codependency. This codependency narrative that we try to build with it. Never truly being in love or in balance with ourselves. So we always going back and forth. And then we're trying to find things to match that argument. Because that's what every time, when you arguing, that's all you're doing. You're trying to get somebody to connect you on that level and complete that circuit. I tell people I'm emotionally mature. I'm married to myself. I'm in balance. I'm centered with myself. So it's damn near impossible to try to get me to have an argument with somebody. It's damn near impossible for somebody to try to get me to step out of where I'm at. To them, it's going to seem like you're uppity and you think that you're better than them and you're always right and all of these things in these aspects. But in reality, is that you're simply in your being. They have not reached that level of becoming. Give them time. The reason that the spirit keep leading them around you in that aspect is because, and there's a big difference. The spirit's going to lead people around you, the decoys, to get you to see what trigger those emotional impulses that you need to work on, or to show you exactly where you just came from. Hell, most of the conversations I have with people that are not directly in my soul tribe or directly connected to me, they sound like client conversations. I stopped having conversations with a lot of family members and a lot of people that I used to rock with very super fucking hard, because I started becoming aware, nigga. I was never a friend. I was never a family member. I was a consultant. They were clients. You see, when you create your new vision, you're going to start seeing everybody as a client. And this is one of those big keys, because you're still within that impression of helping everybody. And you're now digging out of this. You're allowing yourself to fill up this space of helping everybody. And now you're in the aspect of you are making that impact in order for you to move into your authentic self. Me being my authentic self, I'm always me 100% of the time. The perception and the perspective that I am to certain individuals is based on the narratives and the memories that they have, or the thoughts that they have. Those thoughts that they have within their mind, the intellectual aspects that they have connected in their mind, now it create this impulse for them to act out the way that they do. Your key in seeing how people are going to react, how they react, and they bring information to you, is how you move in that space. You'll be like, yeah, I know exactly what I need to do. No fear. You say what you need to say and then you move on. Plant that seed and move on. For some seeds that you're going to plant, they're going to be time bombs. And when it's ready, it will explode and lay everything in ashes around in that space. I've burnt many bridges while building my bridge to the bridge of my authentic self. I've burnt many bridges. I've left many spaces. One big thing for me was like when I would leave a space, I became invisible. I used to tell that joke to a lot of my people that I used to rock with, a lot of friends. I'd be like, yo, like, no, nigga, I disappeared. Man, but you still right here. I'm invisible to them. When you're becoming the vision board, when you're becoming your vision, when you're becoming your authentic self, when you're becoming your purpose, you become invisible to all things that no longer serve a purpose. When they re-show back up, when they pop up, it is your job to reinstate and work on that boundary. This is when I tell people, like, people are going to come through you. I remember I used to always say this, I always used to say this. I used to tell, like, almost every friendship, relationship, everything that I was ever in, I always told everybody, I gave them a disclaimer. I was like, me being in the position that I'm in, and this is even before like being in my spiritual self, me being in the position that I'm in, my pops told me the position that you hold that you are unaware of is going to cause people to come through others to get to you. They're going to use their emotional aspects or try to use their emotional impulses to get to you. That is the responsibility in the process of you being the leader. You being the leader, you being in your purpose, you moving in your shit, you're going to have individuals that are always going to try to discredit you. Keep going forward. In you moving forward, in your process of you growing and you showing and you improving, those decoys are going to keep going. Those decoys are going to keep coming up. Keep going. As you moving forward in your space, taking your ascending, those things are going to come up. Keep going forward. Use what you learn from them to be the ink on your vision board. Use what you learned from that aspect into programming your new sigils, your new symbols. Stop putting yourself into this state of lack mindset. You running around here talking about if I do this and if this happened and if this happened and if I go through this and if this happened and if this show up and if this pop out and if this and if I get this, you're automatically programming lack. So even when you creating your vision board, you're creating your vision. Your vision is only going to be dimly lit by the energy of lack. So whatever sigil you create, whatever you create within your space is going to be based upon lack. I stopped a long time ago basing everything that I did based on lack. And when I noticed that I did that, I noticed the relationships and the way that I interacted with myself changed. I noticed that the way that I was moving and the way that I was speaking changed. I noticed the healing process actually activated because I didn't have the thought process of lack. This is a trippy aspect, but if you got Prime Video, I think it's on Netflix. I don't know, Prime Video. Go on Prime Video and watch Teen Wolf, the series. In season, I want to say it's season like season 3 or 4. But it's just a reason that the spirit had me watching that shit. And there's so many gems within there. And one thing that happened was, if you've never seen Teen Wolf, on Teen Wolf, there was a fight between Derek, he's an alpha wolf, and then Scott. Those are the two of the main characters. And Derek dies. He thinks Derek dies. He gets injured in that same bout. Psychologically in his mind, because he thought Derek had died, he couldn't initiate, because where was like the natural healing, he couldn't initiate his healing process. I want you to think about that. The reason that you can't move forward, the reason that you're stuck within that dim lit vision of lack, is because you're thinking about everybody else that's within that imprint of that same trauma. You're thinking about everybody else that's within that imprint of that event that happened in your life based on that original imprint. You're thinking about them. If you ever said to yourself, I know there's others, my people, they're on the same line. I know there's others, my people this, they need help. My family this, they need help. My friends this, they need help. I'm gonna give you some information that's really gonna change and invoke this burrow and invoke a new thought into your mind. It's gonna shatter some shit. You have to stop acquiring and co-signing on others' karmic debt. You have to stop co-signing on others' karmic debt. Because when it comes time to pay that bill and they can't pay it, just like at the bank or at the bank car lot, the car lot, the apartment complex, the housing place, whatever it may be, they will come to you for that payment. All those people out there rented their lives, just like you used to rent your life. But now that you in this new space, becoming your authentic self, you becoming self-published, there's no more such thing as renting your shit. You're going into ownership. This is a crazy aspect because everything moves when you're looking at everything. And this is another key. Stop getting upset when others take your shit. When others use your shit and run with it. You are the creator. They're supposed to take it. That's their program. They're supposed to take it so you can observe it and experience in different lights. If you have confidence in yourself, because if you allow that to get you upset or take you off your game, it's going to stifle your creativity. You have the spark. You ain't got shit to worry about if they can take it and run with it and put shit with it and whatever, but it won't be authentic. This goes into the space for you. When I was talking about myself, like creating my business, like creating the business plan and creating the vision board, creating my business plan, putting my business plan together, creating the web, creating the structures or the designs and the structures from my business plan, such as the website, such as launch dates and everything. At no point in time, the only reason I remember starting so many different projects at a point in time in my life, wanting to go to school or I remember trying to go into family businesses and business with other people and all of these aspects. And then I would be getting upset because they didn't want to do it. But I had to realize something. They had every right to say that. Because I didn't give them an example of how it would work. Not one that they can actually understand or see. And then that took me further. I was like, if I'm worrying about becoming the example for others, how can I become my authentic self? See, most of us are stuck in that mindset where we are the example for others, but we're nowhere near our authentic self. So we have to remain this example of the trauma. We got to remain the example of the pain. We got to remain the example of these things in order for us to make any fucking moves. It ain't cute. After a while, you just going to be sitting there like, whatever. That shit don't exist to me anymore. That shit ain't got... I'm in a space in my growth where things that used to be able to like knock me off of my game and take me out of my stance, I've learned how to take in, transmute, use that energy, take it to the highest point, and create. You wouldn't know this, but my usual process of creating and doing my recording the podcast, I would have started recording. What time is it right now? I would have started recording about an hour ago, like around 5. I wouldn't have gotten to this part until like 7 o'clock of my podcast, recording the podcast. But I'm almost done recording. The list of events that came through in my day, I transmuted that energy into the highest aspect of myself. I didn't allow it to imprint in my mind to take me off of my game. I learned from it. That's your process of learning. That's what the vision board is. Once you have mastered the tools, like in front of me, I got an Akashic Tarot deck. I got the Human Design chart deck in front of me. I got my Human Design book sitting over here. On the bed, I got 3 books sitting on the bed. Beside me, I got an astrology book for some strange reason. That's the book I'm writing on. Over here in my meditation space, I got DJ Buddha. He's sitting on top of some good reads. But now I can look at my space. I can look at my space and not moving on emotional impulse, but moving off the aspect of indulging my genius. Creating those scenarios for my genius to work through. I can move into any position and be put in any position on the board and make the moves and the plays that I need to make. I'm not thinking about losing. I'm not thinking about winning. I'm in my authentic self. I'm in my truth. That's one of the major keys that we got to get into is understanding our truth, understanding where we at, understanding that aspect into your healing process. Until you're able to do this, you can't even create the vision board, let alone even create the sigils. This is when it comes in, and when you go into it, I tell everybody, everything goes back to that shadow work. Because for a lot of us, we're so gung-ho about, I want to do sigils, and I want to do this, and I want to do this. But you ain't learned the basic mechanics of yourself to even use that tool. So now you're going to become dependent upon that tool. Most people are in the aspects of just relationships, friendships, all of these things in their life. They haven't learned to submit themselves to the attributes of that ideal space, that idea, that thought, or whatever it is, submitting and surrendering to it in order to become it, in order to master it. I've mastered a lot of these tools. A lot of the shit I do is based off energy now. I simply use these external tools to illustrate what I'm speaking. I am the sigil. When I look at my sigil, I see myself. When I look at my altars, I see myself. Everything you look at, you're seeing yourself in full openness. I want you to be the fucking best. Stay tuned for the plug talk. We're going to finish this off. Welcome to the plug talk. You know, Papa Luzo had to keep y'all plugged in. Welcome to the world of the Galactic Alchemist. Powerful ass episode about bringing impact. Speaking about impact, I wanted to put another big thanks, much gratitude to everybody that gives that support, to whether you're catching a live and you sharing it, to you coming on the episode and we doing builds, to building information just in that sense, coming for a service, coming for the consultation, coming for a service, getting a reading, whatever it is, stopping by the store, Occult Alchemy, I appreciate you for that. That really helps me, and as it should be an example of building in your impact. That is your key. Becoming your authentic self is going to require you to build within your impact. When things come up, taking yourself to that higher perspective, that's the key. Yeah. Got Occult Alchemist, the YouTube channel. Last week we got into the Emancipation Proclamation. Very deep lecture. Friday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You know we do that Friday. We do some breakdowns and bring that information to the surface. If you listening today, 2 days the only day, Tuesday, day of that, when 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you know, tune in. Rock Calling Aegis, Facebook Live. Rock Calling Aegis the page, Facebook Live. You know, we get into the God Hour Show. Live readings, give out special on the readings. We build a little bit deeper on the topic. Q&A, we do that build. You know, it's a whole party there. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, God Hour Show. I already told you about the lectures. If you're listening, I've extended that promo code. I'm gonna extend it until it's gonna be extended, and if it don't work, then it don't work. But it's still 2020. We clearing out a lot of the old things before I can bring in the new prints, the new designs, the new shirts, the new everything building on that. I want you to be the fucking best. There is no excuse now. Veils are lifted, you're seeing things for how they are. But the only way you are going to advance and ascend, as we've been saying all through this episode, and we're going to go throughout this week, is stop reacting to the emotional impulse that is that imprint, and start looking at how you're going to do your impact. I want you to be the fucking best. Stay tuned for the closeout. I love you. We love us. Ashe. The imprint of becoming aware of our emotional impulses leads to the impact to opening up ourselves to the vulnerability of our indulging in our genius. That's going to be the key to you becoming self-published or the authentic self and building within that space, that vision. Everything is a training aspect. Everything here is a tool. I want you to be the fucking best. Because that's what I desire you to be the fucking best, because I desire myself to be the best. In saying this to myself and speaking these words to myself and bringing this mantra to myself at every given moment and point in time, it allows the things that come up for me to be more self-aware. Instead of me acting on that emotional impulse to be angry, to step out of myself, step out of the character, step out of my center, I bring it into my space. An eagle doesn't, we've read that quote before, an eagle doesn't fight a snake on the ground. It takes it into its territory. A snake won't fight a mouse on water or a mouse on land. Or a snake won't fight a fish in the water. It'll climb its ass up on the tree and pull it out the water from that way. That's your key. As you're going into the higher aspects of yourself, the higher perspective, you have to acknowledge the things that will make you act on impulse and trying to survive, and move into the aspects of how you are impacting everything into your life. What is your impact? What is your value of your impact? What do you want to disclose? What do you want to build within your impact? Stop getting stuck within the I am the impression of whatever I am. Stop being in the I am impression. and start becoming, I am the impact. I am the God. I am the Titan. But when you say these things, whatever you proclaim to yourself to be, like I said Friday, whatever you claim yourself to be prepared for them tests. Because it's going to test you. And you got a choice. Either you can forfeit or you can step into that ring. Set that bitch on fire. Once again, I desire you to be the fucking best. So many emotional impulses based on the imprints of the trauma stop us from moving forward. Stop us from actually embracing our genius. And you see it every day. If you're sitting in a space right now where you feel like you ain't adequate enough, you ain't smart enough, ask yourself why. Remove the filters. Remove the glamours. Remove the projections. Remove what definitions define you externally so you can start defining yourself internally. It's been another episode of the God Hour podcast. I appreciate your support. You listening today, January 5th. Then I'll see y'all tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the God Hour podcast, on the God Hour show. Rock Carlo Nijas, Facebook page, Facebook Live. Get in there, it's a party. Been another episode of the God Hour podcast. I love you. Oh yeah, if you're interested in the services, I meant to say that. Interested in services? Gotta call alchemistllc.com. There's no more excuses. The veil's been lifted. The shadows are more dense. You can either continue in your existence or you can start moving in this now. I love you. We love us. Ashe.